Good morning. How you guys doing today? I thought since we're in LA, we might begin with a little meditation, some green juice. No, actually, so we're really excited to be here, and because this is LA, and before we talk about why we're here, let's talk about how we got here. I took the 405 to the 10 this morning.
I just took the 10.
The 10 all the way.
Straight up.
Good move. I've lived in LA for a year now. I'm just getting used to the tribal customs, so thank you for indulging me. Really excited to be here today, and it's interesting that as I talked to the 4A's about this session, as we planned for it, we were talking about this being kind of the state of creativity today, and it struck us, as Bill just noted, that the state of creativity is really the state of storytelling, and we are obviously very appropriately in the storytelling capital of the world right now. And I think Kathleen represents, in a lot of ways, the evolution of digital storytelling and all forms of storytelling, including brand storytelling, over the last decade or so, and is a great person to have up here. So before we talk about Meform a little bit, which is the company that she's now the CEO of, I want to kind of start out with your overall career and where you began, because 2005, when you were 25 years old, maybe?
25, 26.
25, 26
in that zone.
years old. Not to reveal your age, sorry, but
it's okay. It's on the internet.
You
Everyone
created,
knows
as a writer, director, producer, one of the first critically acclaimed web series in Theburgh, and you had been in television at that point, and then created for digital. Talk a little about that, as well as what Theburgh was.
For sure. So when I was 25 and kind of working my way up in production, I was a PA on independent film. I created a web series called Theburgh. It was a satire of Williamsburg hipsters. And we started producing and writing this before YouTube was like a thing. It had launched, but no one was really aware of it. And then as we were finishing up editing it, we realized, oh, there's this thing called YouTube. Maybe we should put some of our videos on that instead of just on our website. And so we did, and we uploaded our first video, me and my partner on creating the series, our first video May 24th, 2006. And it was just a short sketch that we had written to go along with our longer form episodes that were on our website. And 6 weeks later, we were in the New York Times. 6 months later, I signed with CAA and got a manager and agent. I felt very Hollywood. And then a year later, I got an email from Michael Eisner offering to meet with me, and then eventually he offered to produce whatever he wanted to do next. So really for me, I am the poster child for YouTube. I drank the Kool-Aid. It's been very beneficial to my career to have that kind of access to distribution, and also access to technology and affordable cameras. You know, essentially we made a television sitcom in our spare time. I continued to have day jobs in traditional television, working my way up the production ranks, ultimately working for Darren Aronofsky at one point, and then producing a television show for David Blaine, this entire time producing a web series, and then producing a web series for Michael Eisner that required us also producing a full-length album, because we created a mockumentary series about an indie rock band going on a cross-country tour. So I cut my teeth as both a writer, producer, and director on the internet. And that was just an incredible experience, obviously working with Michael and Boogaroo and what he was doing. And that ultimately led me to work for a company called Next New Networks, which was what is now called a multi-channel network. It was an early online video startup founded by kind of 5 ex-Viacom executives. They kind of discovered my series, cultivated me as a talent, and then offered me a full-time role running all of their production and programming. And then about 18 months after that, YouTube bought Next New Networks, which kind of got me onto this executive path. And frankly, I wasn't sure what I was going to do inside of Google/YouTube. I mean, it's a wonderful company to work for, but as a creative person, it wasn't at the time the most exciting opportunity.
So, but you actually created what became a pretty exciting opportunity. I don't know how many people in this room have been to a YouTube space facility, the studios that YouTube built for its creators, but that was essentially your brainchild.
Yeah, because I was unclear of what I would do inside of YouTube/Google, I went to my boss and I said, you know, what do I do here? And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to give filmmakers what I didn't have when I started my web series. And he said, what's that? And I said, studios. I want to open studios around the world and give them away for free. And then we did that. Which was crazy. It's a testament to YouTube and Google and how they will let their employees propose insane ideas
right.
and then say yes. And so we built physical production studios in London, Tokyo, Los Angeles, and New York. And then the only requirement to shoot and use what frankly was hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in real estate and facilities and technology was to have a YouTube channel. And it was extraordinary. It was amazing.
Yeah. How many people here, quick show of hands, have been to a YouTube space facility?
There's now 9, I think.
Now 9 of them.
Like,
fabulous. And out here, it's in Playa Vista.
Playa Vista.
In what had been the warehouse, I think, where Howard Hughes stored the Spruce Goose.
Yeah, it's where Howard Hughes built the Spruce Goose. It's where the movie Avatar was shot, actually. Really cool historical development. You should just go check it out. There's also a lot of really cool companies there.
So one of the things I had asked you yesterday, because whether the initial idea for YouTube Space was more to give these creators, take them out of their parents' basement, if you will, or out of their basement and help them create more professional content for YouTube, or was it to create loyalty between those creators and YouTube at a point when there were competitors coming up? And you actually said that, yes, to some degree, both of those, but more that it was about exposing the people and the process behind what had been this mysterious kind of thing, which are really fascinating to me, because I think that when we've created words in the last few years, whether it's millennials or influencers, that kind of take away the fact that these are just people and just creators. And I think part of what you were trying to do was get people to see these are just creators. These are just talented kids who are producing and distributing in a different way.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that was shocking to me when I started to work at YouTube even was that I would meet engineers and product managers and people on the business side of the company that didn't really think about where all the videos came from. They didn't realize that there were people actually making them. And my parents even didn't really understand that. They were like, wait, there's people upload all these? I was like, yeah, there's people who pick up a camera and they film something and they put it on the internet and that's how it works. And so having these spaces really gave these interesting, creative, unique voices a place to gather and be that I felt was really incredibly powerful. And for me, when I was doing this, that's what I needed. You know, people would be like, oh, just get an intern to help you with your web series. And I'd be like, well, they're supposed to meet me in my loft in Williamsburg? Like, no, I'm not doing that. That's insane. And so I wanted to give people a place to gather and learn from each other and exchange ideas and collaborate.
So this idea of collaboration then goes another step for you, because I think one of the people, or a couple of the people that joined one of your YouTube space tours were Ron Howard and Brian Grazer,
yeah,
whom we've all heard of, and that led to an interesting collaboration, which gets us to what you're doing now.
Yeah, I met Ron and a number of the partners who ended up ultimately founding Meform with me on a tour of the YouTube space in Playa Vista. And about 8 months later, they reached out to me and asked me to help start this company. And really the vision of the company was premium scripted storytelling for digital-first audiences. So what kind of audience is consuming content on Facebook, on YouTube, on Snapchat, on Instagram, you know, on even Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, who are not watching traditional television? How do you create stories differently for them? And so they approached me to help start this company. And a big part of the company was creating collaborative moments between kind of what some people would call influencers, I just call them creators, and kind of traditional media talent, showrunners, directors, screenwriters, producers, kind of pairing them together that they could learn from each other and therefore make better and more interesting content.
And you opened the door to brands to be a part of that from the beginning.
Absolutely. We were very lucky, obviously, when you work with someone like Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, a lot of brands approach you. So in our first 2 years, we had a lot of incoming opportunities. Ultimately, we did a really cool collaboration with Universal McCann and Tylenol to do 10 documentaries about 10 unique families. And we paired kind of different socially savvy documentary filmmakers, filmmakers who had made a splash in the world and also knew how to cultivate a following on social, with families from all over the country. We put out those documentaries on YouTube, on Tylenol's YouTube channel, and organically got a lot of audience, including a very hilarious tweet from Kristen Bell, which none of us paid for. We were like, that's awesome that she watched all of them and cried because they were really moving. And it was a really good collaboration between us, the filmmakers, the brand, and the agency.
I definitely want to come back on that because I think there's a lot going on right now with brands forming their own internal studios, with media companies forming brand labs, and there's both a sense of collaboration and competition going on that I think some people feel threatened in, and there's kind of a move again. Actually, I said I'd come back to this later. I'm going to stay with it right now. There's kind of a fear right now that some of these companies, in particular media companies that are forming brand studios and brand labs, want to disintermediate agencies. This was a fear, I think, earlier on in the digital age that kind of went away, that's kind of come back. And my approach has been, what I think is fantastic is I think that all of these players now, brands, media companies, and agencies, are all putting people in place who believe in and understand the power of storytelling, and that brands need to move beyond kind of the interruptive model and tell stories that are worthy of people's time. But the more you have people on every side of the table who get that, the better. But there's also a move in some cases where these companies, I think particularly you mentioned MCNs, which are all redefining themselves right now, and I think trying to figure out their next model. And there's a sense that maybe they're going to work directly with brands, go around agencies. There are brands now like Pepsi and Red Bull and Marriott and Mattel that are creating content very aggressively directly to studios. What do you think kind of the role is for each person or each seat at the table in this model?
I mean, I think what we've discovered is there's lots of ways to collaborate, and I think as long as you come in with a clear goal and agenda, everyone can have a role around the table. The thing I always say is, frankly, I don't know how to do a complex brand strategy across a year with media and content and partnerships and execute against that, nor do I have this infrastructure built inside of our company to do that. But I do know how to tell good stories on digital platforms, work with this emerging talent, and bring you something really unique. So I don't think that it needs to be competitive. I couldn't do that. I could try to make a great 30-second spot. I probably wouldn't be very good at it. I also definitely couldn't do the strategic thinking that an agency would do. So to me, in our experience with Tylenol, it was very symbiotic in the sense that we got to focus on the story, we got to focus with the filmmakers. J3 did a really great job, and the team over there, of protecting the filmmakers and managing the client, frankly. I mean, this was a very different thing for Tylenol to do. It wasn't a commercial. They couldn't come on set. We had to explain to them that if you're filming children and you're documenting families, there's no executives on set from any side. I wasn't on set, no one was on set, because kids will not act authentically with 6 adults behind the camera. And so we said, no one's on set, you're more than welcome to come to the location and sit at the coffee shop down the street, but that's not what's gonna happen. It's not gonna get us the best, most authentic documentary. And I think I give credit to J3 that they really managed Tylenol through that, because they're not the most crazy risky brand, and they were game, and they went on that road. I don't think we could have done it alone, and I don't think J3 could have done it without us. It was very symbiotic.
I think there's a letting go that brands have to do in this world. It's not natural.
There's a letting go that I have to do. So I mean, that has been my biggest lesson since starting the company, is I can't control every single aspect of it. In fact, if I try, ultimately the creative will suffer. And so I have to build trust with the filmmakers we're developing and let them go do what they're going to do, because ultimately that gets us the best creative, instead of trying to control every single detail. Let them be good at what they're good at, right. And usually you'll get something amazing.
Yeah, one of the things that I talk about whenever people are threatened by this is it's really all about just everybody proving value, as opposed to being threatened and saying, is this person trying to do this, or let's punish them here, or let's do this. It's more about, if you enter with the idea that, yeah, there's always going to be some competitive crossover as well as collaboration, just how do you make sure everyone at the table
exactly
is adding
gets
value?
to be good at their job?
Right.
That's the thing we talk a lot about at Meform, is like everyone shows up to do a good job. No one shows up to do a bad job. So like honor that.
Right. And trust. We even have trust. We have matching like blood
brother boo-boos.
We did a little pact backstage of faith. If you see the matching Band-Aids. The role of creativity, and when we talked about a title for this session, we called it the world's largest creative department, which is something that I've talked about for a while, which is this idea that it goes several steps. One is within agencies, and our chief creative officer always says this, we can't just have a creative department, you have to be a creative agency. But I think it goes beyond that now in a really wonderful way for brands, which is, and look, Ron Howard has created branded content for GE and others, right? Werner Herzog has shot, documentaries supported by brands. The level of talent at this point that will create for brands is amazing. And I have this sense that brands should not think about, and by the way, I don't think agencies should be threatened by this, but it's not about being confined to the ideas and thinking that come out of a creative department, when in fact, in essence, you now have access to the world's largest creative department, whether that's a YouTube creator and a young voice that's coming up, or whether it's a Ron Howard. And I think it's interesting to see how you think that's evolved over the last 10 or 12 years, because for me, it kind of went from early on, Hollywood did have a little bit of a sense of like, wait a minute, there's a wallet we haven't tapped into yet, and as financing sources dry up over here, maybe we can go after these guys for money. The next phase of that became, okay, I know if the brand is paying for this, they need a seat at the table, but just sit there quietly and let us do our job. And now I think we're actually at an age of true collaboration. And I think as brands learn to be better storytellers, that Hollywood creators are actually now open to realizing they can tell great stories with brands. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think we're getting to a place where the conversation can be more open and people can acknowledge that, yeah, the brand message has to be in there, but also more and more brands are coming to us and saying, well, we don't really need a heavy brand message. We just want these three kind of tenets that are generally things that you're like, oh, I could make a story about inspiration and dedication, sure, or that is innovation. All those things fit in a story. And so I think it opens up the opportunities for creative people to be working with brands. And I also think brands are more willing to work with emerging filmmakers and younger people, which I think also opens up more opportunities, because I think younger people are more apt to look at brands in a way that's like, okay, they can be my partner. I don't have to feel like I'm selling out if we do it in this way.
I feel as if brand created content is coming out of its kind of ignored stepchild or whatever life, where it was always seen as this kind of secondary version of content. But I think there's been a number of interesting things. Back, I ran the second Cannes jury ever when they were doing branded entertainment, and I remember John Hegarty, obviously a legend of creativity, came out and said at one point on stage, it's great that we're doing all this branded content and entertainment, but we have to be careful unless we're willing to compete not just with other advertising, but with other content that's out there. And I think we're now at that stage where brand content is beginning to rise to that level. We've had things like winning Emmys by some branded content. In the case of the, I'm blanking for a second, sorry, Pereira Odell created Intel for Intel, the Beauty Inside, actually won an Emmy for innovation. We've seen now that at Cannes they changed what was the branded entertainment category to just the entertainment category. There's a piece in the New York Times today about the second annual X Awards at the Tribeca Film Festival, and there's a recognition by them as well that they're going to start honoring this work. Do you think we can actually get to a stage where branded content is seen as, and maybe it has to be, because I think we're headed to a world where audiences will you're either creating something that they choose to spend time with, or you're not going to get your message across.
Yeah, I think it has to be. I think it's going to get there because that's the only way that brands are going to get their message out. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think if you have to make good content, you have to think thoughtfully about what is the product you're selling, what is the story behind it, what is the emotional reason anyone would give a crap about insurance or this car or this CPG brand, and find a story that relates to that. In some ways, I think that's like a more authentic version of advertising than just simply making a commercial.
Right.
Because you're actually appealing to people's emotional needs and wants.
Right. It's a big evolution, and it's about 10 years in. We were saying backstage, Digitas created the New Fronts 10 years ago as a half day for our clients to understand what was going on in digital and to pay more attention to it. Now we're 10 years down the road. It's a 2-week-long, multi-billion-dollar marketplace. Meform is doing its first.
We're doing a little
New Front
cocktail
event this
hour.
year.
I wouldn't call it a new front. We're very low key, but we're doing a cocktail hour May 3rd.
During the New Fronts, though.
During the New Fronts.
What do you think has been the kind of biggest evolution? Because I think you said you were at the first New Front in 2008. What do you think has been the biggest change in that digital content marketplace during that period?
I think it's become less of an educational event and more of actually a marketplace. I think the first couple of years was like, hey, there's this thing called the internet and there's video on it and you can be a part of it. Now there's big players like Go90 had Verizon's Go90 had a huge event last year. I'm sure they're going to top it again this year. Of big players really investing time into look at all this great content we have and then advertisers actually showing up.
Right. I also think the change, early on, I think there was too much kind of mimicking of the TV
totally.
Up front. And there was this sense of, let us show you a slate of things that you as a brand can sponsor or integrate into. And now it's more, let's talk to you about how we can co-create.
Yeah. It's a less of a like, this is what's going to launch. Because it didn't really work that way, digital, because there's no like fall premiere season.
Right.
So it's like, there's no urgency. But now I think the idea of like, oh, we can co-create and here are some opportunities and ideas is a much more engaging conversation.
So Meform, I think you said that Meform is 3 years old today, maybe?
As of today.
To the day.
Yeah, to the day.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You began as the Chief Creative Officer. In December, you became the CEO, although you were always the top person there. But the CEO title came with an additional raise of $18 million in financing from ITV and Discovery Communications, among others. How does that change the mandate, or does it, for what you're going to do going forward? I
mean, I think with the investment, the mandate changes to say bigger, better, badder. So that's, we're developing more, we're producing more pilots. We have a much healthier, a more robust development pipeline in terms of the series we're working on. We also have a much bigger branded entertainment team. This was something that we couldn't resource initially in the first 2 years. Now we have a whole team dedicated to it. And so we're talking more proactively with brands. A lot of our first 2 years was reactive opportunities. And then also growing our consumer-facing brand, because we found in our first 2 years and making all of our series that we were starting to develop our own brand. And so what does that mean on social for us? Like, what do we put on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, so people understand where they can find our content and how we can drive more value for our partners?
And you guys, you've made about 30 pilots, 20 have gone to series?
We made 43 pilots,
43
22 have gone to series. We delivered 16 series in 16 months last year, which was intense. And then this year we're going to end up producing 40 pilots and hopefully even more series.
So you've got your first thing going to television, Final Space, right? With Conan O'Brien, I think, and his production company involved. It raises an interesting question. I find that in some cases, brands will create great digital programs, but if something goes to television, there's still this sense that it's graduated almost, that that's a higher level thing, even though sometimes the audience they're getting on television is not as big as the audience they're getting in digital.
Or maybe may not be the right audience.
Right. Well, how do you approach that? Do you think of something like, oh, Final Space is going to TV, that's a bigger victory than getting a digital pickup?
No, I mean, I think for us, we really are building a digital business. The goal isn't to be, a stepping stone to TV. Digital is the growing marketplace, not linear television. We're very proud of Final Space, and we're really excited. We took Final Space to the place that we thought was the best partner for the creative. We shopped it to a lot of networks and digital platforms, and this TBS was ultimately the home that we felt would both honor Olin Rogers, the creator of the series, as well as Meform and Conoco's involvement. And so for us, it was mostly exciting because they were so excited about the show. Right. It wasn't like exciting because it was linear television. And I also think TBS was looking for something that a younger, kind of more digital savvy voice to it, which Final Space definitely does not look or act like anything you've ever seen on TV before. We're really pumped about it. It's gonna be cool.
So let's talk a little about creative talent. We're at a point in time where A lot of traditional, pretty heavyweight, big name agency creative talent is ending up in places like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat, and there's a lot of, there's a talent drain to some degree. What do you think agencies have to do to compete for the best talent, and what kinds of skill sets and where should they be hiring from rather than maybe bringing people up through their traditional pipeline?
Well, I would say, speaking as a creative person myself, the thing that always motivates me is creative freedom and the ability to actually make things. And so what people like about Meform when they come and work with us, both traditional talent and the digital talent we work with, is that we make things. We don't just talk about making things. We make pilots, we actively produce, we very actively develop and sell series. We don't wait around for people to give us opportunities. And so when I'm thinking about creative agencies, it's just creatives are happier when they're making stuff. So the more you can engage them in that way, the happier they're gonna be. It's part of the reason I ultimately did not think I would stay at YouTube very long, because I wasn't making things. I made the buildings, they were awesome, but then they were done and there was no more things to make. So I wanted to go someplace where I would get to be really involved in the creative. In terms of what people need to know how to do, I think the biggest lesson for creative people and storytellers right now is how to be nimble. You need to look for people who are going to be very comfortable in a changing landscape. The way I illustrate this to people is to talk about, when I worked at YouTube, the thing I learned is the thing YouTube will do every week, no matter what, is they will push code. That means every Wednesday, something, even infinitesimal, will change about the YouTube ecosystem. They'll be either improving something, changing the search algorithm, tweaking how the thumbnails appear, because they're constantly improving their product. And that will impact how your content is discovered or viewed or seen. And so as a producer and a storyteller, you have to be very comfortable working in a very dynamic ecosystem, because Netflix is doing the same thing, YouTube's doing the same, Facebook's doing the same thing, Snapchat, there's new technology every day. It's very different than the linear television world, where it pretty much didn't change that much from a technology perspective ever. It's like DVR was a huge change for them. More channels, there were like big moments where the ecosystem shifted.
And even then, the format for the advertising was pretty consistent.
But yeah,
Whereas
exactly.
now, what storytelling looks like in Snapchat versus what it looks like on YouTube.
The ad units, like on Vessel versus YouTube Red versus Facebook, like they're all changing. And then also how the audience reacts to them is changing. And so you have to find creative people who are really comfortable with that level of change, but also can be in dialogue with technology products and understand both kind of the right and left brain aspect of like, oh, if this thing changes about the search algorithm, I'm watching this thing happen on the product, I have to think differently about my content. Or the thumbnails are shaped differently on Snapchat versus YouTube, so we should do our thumbnails differently. That's a skill set that not every creative person has.
Right. So we were talking about, when we started out, obviously it's about 12 years ago you did Theburgh. About 12 years ago I wrote the book Madison and Vine. And I was talking to Jay Goodman at CAA recently about how much has changed in that time, but also in some ways how little has changed. Some of the same challenges and issues for brands and storytelling that existed then are still there now, whether it's sometimes lack of common definitions or measurement, or how much to invest in it, how to do it, how to take that seat at the table or not. What would you hope, if we were sitting down here, again, I won't necessarily say 10 years from now, but even 2 years from now, is the advance that you'd most like to see in this kind of collaboration dance between clients, creatives, agencies, and in the development of content?
What I most like to hope is for us to have a common language around what our goals are. I think often brands are still gunning for scale when that may not necessarily be the most appropriate choice for what their initiatives are, and a common language around what a view is and what engagement is. Because I think we have immense opportunity with all this technology to understand all those things and have a common language, but yet we're all avoiding it for some reason on all sides, because it's just way easier to think about TV.
All right. Sounds like a good challenge for the industry going forward. Thank you for your time.
Thanks,
and thank
Scott.
you all for being a great audience.
Thank you.